Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is our Let's Talk Arsenal series, the show in which I'm joined by a variety of guests of weird and wonderful people to talk about Arsenal. And if there's two words that I'd use to describe a person, it's this man. How you doing, Mike? Good, you
I'm
well?
doing very well, very well. Happy Father's Day, Tom. It's a little bit early. I know that the kid hasn't been born yet, but I'm just anticipating it, and I'm spending my Father's Day with the son that I've adopted in recent years. So
people will believe you. So I'll have people messaging me now saying congratulations.
When I found you at the orphanage 7 years ago, asking could I have some more? I was like, yes, I will take this one in. He's adorable. He seems to have promise, and here we are on Father's Day 7 years later.
Well, as you did say on the Chicago live pod, I am both your son and father, so I feel as though I can celebrate.
Yeah, you're the age to be my son, and you're the maturity to be my father. So that's
there you go.
Yeah, and I am missing a father figure these days, as most people know. So you step in perfectly.
Beautiful stuff. Obviously, good evening, good afternoon, good morning to our chat box, wherever you happen to be joining us from. I saw someone ask where the unicorn is. I immediately saw you turn around and look for it.
It's over there. It may end up joining us. Depends on how the currents flow.
Yeah, it will float by at some stage. Yes, I hope you all have had a fantastic day, weekend so far, and happy Father's Day, of course, to those that are indeed celebrating it today. And my thoughts are with those for whom it is maybe a more difficult day as well.
Daniel Robert thinks I just dropped news about your family groups.
Well, I have recently become an uncle, to be fair, so that's something to celebrate, I suppose. But
then you have to do the dog, and then you graduate to actual.
Yeah, so become an uncle, get a dog that I'm not allergic to, and then eventually graduate.
A kid that you're not allergic to.
No, I'm just allergic to so many things. Like this office makes me sneeze. Hay fever is ridiculous. That I now play golf all the time, which makes it 10 times worse.
Andy, who we both know and love, came to visit us in Florida about 2 months ago, and he is deathly allergic to shellfish. Anything that is or has touched or been around shellfish, like lobster, clams, oysters.
Do we know what shellfish are?
Yeah, I don't know if the whole chat knows who shellfish are. And it completely impacted our whole visit together, because you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. We were walking on a path in back of me, the path up that mountain or the hill in the back, that it was lined with fake shells, and he was freaking out and he's like, I think I can't feel my face anymore. So allergies suck. I feel sorry for you. Sorry.
Well, Arsenal don't seem to be allergic to making bids for players. This summer transfer window, you see, it's almost like I do this on a daily basis now, isn't it? And we've put in a significant number of bids. This show specifically, and the idea of this show is kind of sparked upon Fabrizio Romano's tweet regarding Thomas Partey and the potential idea that he could move on, and it does seem to indicate that there's a willingness from Arsenal to completely overhaul that deeper area of the midfield this summer. And I remember at the start of the summer, I think yourself and a lot of others were very much focused on the idea of reinforcing rather than replacing. And yet it seems like we're going to have to do both this summer. Not only are we going to look to have to replace Xhaka, potentially Thomas Partey, and obviously we need to reinforce on top of that. So first of all, let me get your reaction to seeing these links with there being an openness reportedly from Arsenal to allow Partey to go if they get what is described as a considerable bid.
I think that the word is concrete interest. That was the word of the day today on Twitter, and specifically from the journal that you mentioned, is concrete interest. It's like he's just discovered concrete and how it could be worked into every single comment.
Critical, crucial stages.
Registered interest. I mean, that's what I like about transfer season. I like nothing else about transfer season other than in the transfer window, other than the phrases. I mean, as you know, I love phrases that are uniquely football or uniquely English. In fact, that's what this is for. Yeah. But it gets to a complete another level when it comes to the various stages of a transfer, from registering initial interest to tracking the player to agreeing personal terms before they've discussed with the club, which is also known as tapping up and supposed to be illegal. It's all just it's a world in and of itself, and it's a fascinating, frustrating, annoying world. But that isn't the question you asked me. I think you have to be open to everything, especially when the players who are being discussed are in their late 20s or early 30s, and you're talking about potentially reinforcing or replacing with younger talent who has the opportunity to play at that level for many, many, many years. But I don't know that we ever envisioned a complete overhaul of the midfield to where the two players who, when they were fit and healthy and playing together last season, were phenomenal together, being replaced with two players who maybe have Premier League experience but aren't at the same level, haven't done it for the same amount of time, and there's a level of kind of interruption of the ascendancy that we've kind of built in this team together. Now, it could work out very, very well. Declan Rice, I don't think, would take much time to acclimate to his new surroundings. If we think it's Lavia instead of Caicedo, as it appears at this point, to replace Partey if he leaves, there's a little bit less experience playing at the top level there. But I think we need to be open to it, and if it's possible for Partey to leave and we get remunerated well for it, that's fine. But if it's 2 out, 2 in, and we're still left with our replacements being either a more forward, a 9 or a 7 or an 11 playing in the or a 10 playing in the 8, or Fabio Vieira playing in the 8, or our next options there being a non-loaned Sambi Lakanga or a Mo El Neni, then I think we're missing the boat. And if we let those two go, who are established and really kind of anchored our midfield last season, I think we need to bring, as the chat has been talking about, either 3 or 4 in.
Yeah. It's what I wrote about today. I said if they both go, Arsenal need to bring in 3 midfielders, not including Kai Havertz, who's being talked about as a potential, option in that kind of forward-thinking midfield position potentially as well. You'd need to get Rice through the door. You'd need to get a Caicedo or Caicedo alternative like Lavia through the door. And you'd need, say, like Arsenal have made an offer to Gundogan, for instance. Like you'd need a Gundogan through the door. Or
that kind of a profile where you've got a 19-year-old, and I don't know, I didn't look. He's 19.
24 with Rice. And
well, I'm talking about Lavia.
Lavia's 19.
Yeah, Lavia's 19 until he's 20. You're bringing in a 19-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 31-year-old if it's Gundogan. That profile I'm good with. There's stability, there's leadership, there's everything that you need. I mean, you're bringing in 2 team captains in that situation, and a guy who has all the promise in the world and is maybe going to be half, if not less than half the price of what Caicedo looks to be moving for. I'd rather Caicedo. I'd rather splunk the money on Caicedo. He seems like a can't-miss player, but, the concrete interest seems to have cooled on him.
Thanks for saying spunk, by the way. That was great.
Did I say that?
I'd rather spunk the money on Caicedo.
Did I say? Yeah.
It just comes naturally. That's
great. It comes naturally, and it's
these videos before.
It's Father's Day too, so I mean,
what I'm gonna have to put into, because for those that don't run YouTube and don't have a channel, when you monetize a video, you have to do a checklist of things that have been said throughout the video. And 9 out of 10 times, I tick the none of the above box.
They give you.
When I have mic on, I leave it all blank until afterwards.
they give you 100 different words, and you have to name how many times you said that. I don't think spunking money on a player really.
Yeah, I don't think that would come up in the list. I just think it's a very Mike-esque word. I haven't actually. We talked about the potential of Partey's exit. I haven't actually asked you how you feel about the idea of it. From a purely footballing perspective, Partey came in 2020, signed for £45 million, has had injury issues, obviously persistently since he's been here. But, first half of the season, minimum, was for me the best defensive midfielder in the Premier League. And then I think as we go throughout the rest of the campaign, I think Rodri edged it across the whole season. If we lose Rodri, I wish we were losing Rodri. If we lose Partey, obviously Rice, you'd imagine, should that be successful, immediately slots in. And I've had a few chats with Clive, who thinks that actually if Partey was to stay, Rice would have been more so with Partey rather than instead of Partey. But if Partey goes, I'd imagine that Rice would be the obvious guy to anchor that midfield, and for good reason. But there is part of me that thinks, I don't know what kind of offer I could get that would make me go, it's worth losing Partey, and then seeing a player like Rice come in, and we then lose that competitive kind of rotational thing we've yearned for in this Arsenal team, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's you wanted to kind of push for competition in the top spot, so that you could have first team level players who can't break into the first team and are available for the cup competitions that we played so poorly in this last season, because we didn't have that level of player behind our starters. So we either had to overplay our starters, Saka and such, or take such a drop in quality in players that we just didn't have what it took to compete, in 4 different levels, in 4 different competitions. So, I would prefer there be a bridge to the next generation where Rice is coming in, and you'd prefer Rice to start over Xhaka, and it's debatable whether you'd prefer Rice to start over Xhaka or Partey right now. But if we didn't have to replace both, I think Rice is good enough in either position to play with either person. Yeah. And if you bring in Rice and Lavia and don't get rid of Partey, that's the kind of situation that's great for me, because then you've got competition, you've got depth, you've got the ability not to have to rush somebody who's 19 and only has 1 year of Premier League, top true experience into the game. So I just, what makes me feel better about losing Partey in that situation would be somebody like Gundogan, who we're not necessarily counting on to be our midfielder of the future, but clearly is still playing at the top level despite his age. He's almost 4 or 5 years older than you at this point, and that is old. But yeah, it doesn't make much sense to me if it's 2 in, 2 out, and that does concern me a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's clear. For me, if Arsenal end this window having not added one more midfielder than we started with, I think they've underdone what we needed. Especially, Charlie Patino, for instance, is also expected, to move on this summer. There doesn't look to be a pathway. It'd be strange if we allowed him to leave and then didn't add one more midfielder as well this window. But we've heard nothing.
And if the 2 that leave are Partey and Xhaka, and the 2 that come in are Lavia and Havertz, well, okay, I kind of think that we can almost feel good about Rice. I'm not quite, but almost feel good about Rice. So if Havertz is the 3rd guy that comes in, again, it's debatable, because there's such a debate about Havertz. Obviously, the people I trust to know the most about him are positive on it. The folks that simply look at, he sucks for Chelsea, are negative about it. But I tend to believe the former than the latter. But I'm not sure that helps us with our midfield depth and confidence to know that our second midfielder is going to be Premier League quality.
Yeah, if for those listening, that if you do have your doubts on Havertz, it's worth watching our tactical breakdown I did with Drew. That might give you some more positive outlook on that deal, because Drew, the show's not designed to be, Havertz is great. The show is designed to kind of talk about what Havertz was prior to the misuse of him at Chelsea, and what that talent is there. And also, as we talked about before, and maybe we'll talk about Havertz in more detail in a bit, but it's been more about kind of, clearly I have a reason to trust Arteta and Edu's investments, because the majority of their investments, the proper investments that we've seen, have been positive. Sticking though with Partey for the moment, we're seeing news today of Wolves agreeing, I think it's £47 million for Ruben Neves to leave for a Saudi Arabian side. Is there an element of maybe Arsenal should be looking to, in the same way that I remember the Chinese league was obviously growing and Chelsea benefited a lot from that. I think a number of other teams in the continent benefited a lot from it as well. Should we be looking to try and exploit that potential avenue for player sales? If, say, a club comes in with a £40 million plus bid for Partey, I'm inclined to accept that.
Well, that would be almost insulting, considering that everyone else is getting £100 million. I mean, this is this is a conversation that's about morality It's got touches of finance and corruption involved, and I'm not talking about corruption necessarily from the Saudi side. I'm talking about corruption within the Premier League, where teams are making backroom deals to potentially funnel money. And, you know, I mean, there's a whole thing going on with Chelsea and Saudi Arabia right now. And I'm not going to get into that on the podcast, because a lot of it is suppositions and kind of drawing conclusions from things. But
right,
it's very similar.
I mean, you're talking like sponsorships for clubs that are owned by the same nation. Is that what you mean?
Not necessarily. I'm talking about inflated transfer fees for players.
Oh, okay.
That count towards bailing out of financial fair play when you get 80 million pounds for a player that if you sold him to a Premier League team or a French or a Spanish league team, you'd get 40 million for. And that's right. And so, you know, the question is, if like with China, I mean, they got ridiculous money for Oscar. There were a couple others, and a couple other teams got money for those guys when they were spending money in China a few years back. It's one of these things. If you know, if you can't beat them, should you join them? I'm torn about it, because would I rather sell Thomas Partey for 50 or 60 million pounds at this point than, you know, try to sell him someplace else where he's going to get 20 or 30? Yeah, I mean, that would be great on paper for our organization, for our club, and for our finances and our ability to reinforce. So it wouldn't bother me that much. But what does bother me is I think you're going to see most of the deals coming from one or two clubs. I was surprised to see Wolves involved in that, but I think you're going to see most of the deals coming from one or two clubs, one of which is Chelsea. And, you know, and again, if you can't beat them, join them when it comes to this particular thing. It's a hard call to make. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't join them, beat them. So TJ Assassin says.
Oh, that's even better. I like that.
I think, you know, from my perspective, it's if say someone asked me earlier, how much do you think we would get from Partey? And at that point, it was before kind of this Saudi thing was suggested. And from my side of things, it was like Italian clubs being linked. And if that's the case, I can't see an Italian side spending more than 30 million pounds on, if that, you know, on Thomas Partey.
I was going to say 20, 25 because
yeah, that's what I was kind of, I said between 20 and 30s, I thought what we would get, because he's an aging player with 2 years left on his deal. There's an openness from Arsenal, it seems, to move him on if these reports are to be believed. He's got a track record of injury problems, and this is the most Arsenal are ever going to get in a window for him for the rest of his career. And it's the right time to sell him as well.
His book value right now, by the way, is about 18 million. That's the depreciated value of Thomas Partey with 2 years left on his contract. So selling him for anything more than 18 million, and you know, by those discussions, you could maybe get another 4 to 10 to 12 million on top of that is more profit. It's more, you know, it helps the financials, which most people don't care about, but it does help with recruitment and sustaining everything. So, you know, he's a player. If you can make a profit on a player who's in their 30s, that's fairly unusual. That said, if Saudi Arabia came in tomorrow and said, we want him tomorrow, and I don't know if that's even possible, but if they said that and we're willing to offer, you know, Ruben Neves money for him, I think you have to consider it, but you also have to do more than just replace him with a 19-year-old who has a tremendous amount of potential, but no track record of experience doing it over and over and over again. So you'd have to replace him with Lavia and Gundogan. I don't know if I've answered your
Rice, you know. So
yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question from the Saudi element of it, because I'm filled with outrage about what's about to happen.
Yeah,
and it's a little hard for me to personalize that to Arsenal right now. So I mean, it's a great question, and I don't really know how I feel about it at this point. That's the truth.
Honestly, mate, and not enough people use the words, 3 special words when asked a question these days, and that's I don't know. People don't use that answer enough. There's the unicorn.
I was just letting the natural winds take over. I wasn't going to go grab.
He really wants to get involved with the podcast.
She literally just comes in for a visit. It's great. Oh, now she's gone.
She didn't want to talk about this, you know, this Saudi stuff. No. Who can blame her? But yeah, I think that there are obviously a lot of intricacies to this potential Partey exit. if it happens, the bottom line for me is that Arsenal, and we've agreed on this, needs, I think, be looking at bringing in 3 if Xhaka's obviously included in that exit as well, not including Havertz as well. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, let's have a quick chat. I mean, I know you're not one for dossiers and stuff, but Romeo Lavia, 19-year-old guy, was really exciting, for Southampton, stood out amongst the rest. I did see someone tweet me, I'll probably try and find that while you're talking about it, suggesting basically that he's a 19-year-old kid still. The expectation that he could play regularly for a top Premier League team, is it there? There's not many 19-year-olds bar Jude Bellingham that are able to do that. But is it a good investment for suggested figures of upwards of £40 million?
I think it's a can't miss investment at those levels because, I mean, again, you can have a 19-year-old and then 3 or 4 years later, he's worth less than he was when he was 19. I mean, Ainsley Maitland-Niles is a good example of that. And we've seen it time and time again. But for a player with the trajectory and the track record, I mean, he was on Manchester City for a reason. He never quite broke into regular first team appearances. In fact, I don't know if he ever made one other than a League Cup appearance. But it's the type of thing where you can envision that he's not going to get tremendously worse. And if you buy a £35 million player, or if that's what he ends up going for, I mean, he is leaving a relegated team, and he doesn't pan out as your guy for the next 6, 7, 8 years, you're unlikely to get too much less than 30 million for him. And by that point, he's depreciated as well. I mean, I hate to keep bringing finances into it, but that's the way it works. You don't have to sell him for 30 million in 4 years from now in order to get your money back. It's different. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a low risk thing. I also think Jude Bellingham at 120 million at age 19 is a low risk thing because he's just that good of a player. I mean, the risk there is injury. The risk with Lavia is that he could potentially fulfill his potential or he might not. That's why I would rather have a 1 and 1A in that position. If Partey, I'd rather Partey be the 1A. The 1 and 1A. Yeah. And if he's not going to be, I'd rather Gundogan or someone of that ilk be the 1A, because I don't think Lavia is ready to be. I mean, he's certainly not ready to play 55 games a year.
No, of course not. But to be honest, we shouldn't really be in a position where too many of our players are doing that anyway. We need to be in a position where we're able to competitively rotate players out and sub players. If they are playing 55 games, it's not 55 90-minute matches. It's 55 games where they've played 60 minutes or 30 minutes. That's what we need to be looking at trying to achieve. Gunnarola says 19-year-old with similar outage to Partey in terms of injury. Well, I'm just looking at his injury record on Transfermarkt. He's had one injury, if this is correct, which was from August 30 of 22 to October 24, 22. He missed 8 games because of a hamstring problem. That's the only injury that Transfermarkt have got on record for him. So it doesn't seem that there's a significant problem for Lavia in terms of injury.
But that's because he hasn't gotten to Arsenal yet. That's where the problem is.
It's not. I mean, it's true. We just have this thing. We have a pool of injuries. But yeah, he started every game for Southampton bar 1 from game week 19 through to the end of the season. He missed. I know he started the first 5 games as well before he had that hamstring injury. So he started almost every game by that period that he was out with a hamstring problem.
Can I say a couple of things? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought that was a segue. One thing from the chat and then one thing from me, which is, so I didn't realize that I honestly didn't become, you know this about me. I didn't become aware of Lavia until close to the end of the season. I mean, really kind of when we played them when we were together in Chicago. I mean, that was when it was like, this guy is a baller.
Yeah.
So, he's not just got one year of experience at the top level. He's got a portion of 1 year of experience at the top level. So again, he is a pure potential play as opposed to Caicedo, who he doesn't have 5 years in the Premier League either, but there's just a difference. But I think when you think of Caicedo versus Lavia, and a difference between a healthy Thomas Partey and Lavia as well. But the second thing I wanted to bring up from the chat is it's a great comment that is really true. We're forgetting the Jorginho of all of this. And, I honestly was. I completely forgot that he was still with this club and can potentially serve his purpose, which I fully believed was to be a 18-month transitionary stability force in our club. Someone who was good, who was never going to be great, who could keep the midfield together. And I completely, when I'm thinking of the sixes and that if we let Partey go and bring in Lavia, we're still short and inexperienced there. Jorginho, I honestly was forgetting about him. So
it's
a great
easy
point.
forgot, you're not the only one that has done it. I've been guilty of going, oh yeah, I remember we got that player. I forgot El Neni existed for a long period of time, to be honest.
I was thinking in terms of El Neni, but I'm not relying on him for doing a job in a large way.
Malesi says, please stop the Lavia hype. Honestly, he's not taken Arsenal to the next level. We are past prospects. We'd just be shooting ourselves in the foot. I know other people hold this point of view about kind of Arsenal need to be looking to get competitors. What I would say is that, this isn't like Arsenal going and getting a guy that's, a backup at some other club on the continent that's getting minutes here and there. This isn't, I wouldn't even look at this kind of as an Ivan Fresneda, type deal. This Lavia has played, as I've talked about there, consistently now in the Premier League, stood out for Southampton, who you should, if you're discounting him because he was relegated with Southampton, I'd put you fourth Aaron Ramsdale as the example. Just because a player is relegated does not mean that they aren't lacking in quality. So, yeah, absolutely. And I think Declan Rice was involved in a relegation scrap this season with West Ham themselves. So,
yeah, that narrative needs to be put to bed once and for all, that players who played 100%. On teams that got relegated are not good enough. That's absurd. But if they got relegated because he was poor, that's a different story. But you can still be a really good player on a relegated team. And
this is where I think Jorginho comes into the conversation, because if you add Lavia and you add, let's hypothetically say Gundogan, and you add Rice, Gundogan and Rice are two very experienced players. Rice is 24, but he's played, I think, over 300 games at the top level. Yeah, that's experience. He's won a European Cup final now with West Ham as well. It's experience. And I think if you add Lavia into that group, who has a season of Premier League football under his belt, you're reinforcing, you're adding reinforcement. And that's what we've asked Arsenal to do this summer. And we've also moved towards this rhetoric of signing Premier League players. Mike, you've known me for a long time now, maybe too long, some people might say. But I have called for Arsenal to switch from this idea of signing just players and gems from the continent on bargains, effectively, to start moving towards a Premier League angled transfer strategy. And that's exactly what Arteta's done. And look where it's taken us. So,
yeah, my crying out for that started a few years ago as well. Like when we brought in, with the Mustafi experiment and the Socrates experiment, I started just screaming to anyone that would listen. Look at Lewis Dunk. Look at Nathan Ake. These are guys that aren't stars at the time in the Premier League. I think Dunk was playing for Wolves, was it?
No.
Before Brighton?
Was he?
So I forget who he was playing for before Brighton, but that's the time frame. And Ake was basically not getting into games with Chelsea, and maybe he was on a loan someplace.
He was at He came through at Brighton, Dunk. I think you might be thinking of someone else. Was it Webster, maybe? Or
no, it was definitely Lewis Dunk. Maybe he's. I don't know.
He came through at Brighton.
Okay, those kinds of players who he played every single minute. I think Lewis Dunk in a season, and they're solid. They may not be William Saliba, and they may not be Thiago Silva in his prime, but these are guys who know the league. And I think knowing the league and being and knowing the competition and being up to speed on it just eliminates a transitionary period that you see with so many players who come from different leagues and some of whom never make the transition, the Nicola Pepes of the world and that sort of thing. I'd rather have a Premier League experienced winger, as long as it's not Wilfried Zaha, than bringing in a risky guy like Pepe or somebody like that. But so I'm 100% with you on the Premier League experience thing, and I don't care whether they got relegated or not, as long as they're talented and they can fit in to a squad. And the challenge we have with our next generation of transfers is they either have to be brought in as a ironclad number one at their position, i.e. Declan Rice, or they need to be people who are accepting of role-playing situations. And the two best examples of people who don't get as much game time as they would if they were anywhere else, but were perfectly happy to be at where they were, are Riyad Mahrez and Ilkay Gundogan. That's how you build championship teams. It's not just managing players and having two starting 11s. It's managing the personalities and the needs. And when you got Sambi Lokonga complaining that he's not getting enough game time, and Ainsley Maitland-Niles complaining that he's not playing at the position he wants to play in, those are guys you just get out, because they're not going to be part of your two separate 11 strategy that if you can be able to accomplish that, you do. So that's, I think, why we have to start looking at the personality of these players and whether they'd be willing to fit a role where they're being brought on for 30 minutes in Premier League games and then starting cup games, and sometimes vice versa. And when there's injuries, they play more. I mean, those are the players we need. So yeah, I mean, I think Lavia would be a guy that doesn't necessarily. I mean, I don't know anything about his personality, so I don't know why I was about to act like I did. I would hope he would be somebody who would understand that if his competition for his spot is Thomas Partey or Ilkay Gundogan, that he'd probably play about half the available minutes and not all the time.
No, I agree. Personality and mentality is obviously something Arteta's really prioritized in terms of the signings he's tried to make, and they wouldn't be signing players now if they didn't feel as though that was the case. They signed Lokonga, for instance, because they got really good recommendations from Vincent Kompany at the time.
And Thierry Henry.
Maybe they might have second thoughts about doing that again next time, but they really do their due diligence in terms of mentality. And if they think that Kai Havertz, for instance, doesn't have the mentality, they wouldn't be looking to try and sign him. They would have done their due diligence on this as well. Just before we move on to the next topic, there's over 1,000 people watching today's show. So please do drop a like on the video, of course, if you would like to see more of Mike and his stuff. It's very different to what you're hearing now, but he still does produce some nuggets of gold. So please do go over to the Gooners Pods and subscribe. You can find that on Twitter at the Gooners Pod. There'll be a link to the channel as well in today's video, of course. So please make sure you go and check it out. But yeah, drop a like if you're new. Also subscribe. We do shows every day at 8 a.m. UK time, and you can catch up if you're based over in the western side of things, and you can't watch the 8 a.m. show live. You can catch up on them, but I'm trying to do more of these evening shows as well, so we got more coverage across the day, and clearly it's proving popular. So thank you so much, everyone that's tuned in.
Plus, you need that big American following, and other than me, there's no one else here that's up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch those 8 a.m. shows. So
you'd be surprised.
Have you noticed the chat is heavily more English and European on those 8 a.m. shows? And
yeah, of course it is.
Well, hence
and
why
obviously those in the eastern part of the world as well.
He hates America. He's xenophobic.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering where this was going. It was just, we're going to make him xenophobic. Fantastic.
I woke up today about like half an hour ago, right after the pod started, and I said, what should we make Tom today? Yep, xenophobic. Let's do it.
Yeah. No, if you are tuning in from the US or, of course, Canada or South America, thank you. And I love every single one of you equally. But thank you ever so much for tuning in, and do indeed caress that like button. As I see some people, Wes Bird says, caress the like button. It's very much appreciated when you do that. We haven't really talked about Declan Rice in too much detail so far. And I think that the biggest talking point with Declan Rice right now is that, look, it's progressing. We're getting 17 updates that all say different things, but effectively mean the same thing every day. And until, from my perspective anyway, that we get a real bit of breaking news regarding the second bid, that some suggest it's already been made, some suggest it's coming. I haven't been able to confirm that on my side of things in either direction yet, so I can't personally comment. But the first bids that we can talk about has been described in some circles as derisory, as embarrassing. I saw Tim Stillman put a great tweet out where he's kind of saying that he felt uncomfortable about people talking about an amount of money in the sense of £80 million as derisory, and it's uncomfortable. And I agree with that point of view. That said, in the context of football, and my colleague Kai Karnak of Football London reported that 80 million was supposedly in installments spread across 6 years, which if I was West Ham, I'd feel pretty mugged, in that if Arsenal came in, or anyone came in for that matter, with that type of deal. But, well, not even but. How do you feel about Arsenal's approach to that first bid? Because I initially was quite defensive of it, in the sense that the first bid is to open the negotiations, and 9 out of 10 times, 99 times out of 100, the first bids are often rejected. But it did seem we lowballed them quite significantly more than I expected us to.
Yeah, I mean, there goes the narrative that this thing was done weeks ago, because, I mean, if it was done weeks ago or months ago, as one of my mates likes to say, oh, this was done in March, so that when it is eventually done, he was like, I told you so. And the bald upside down headed guy that I'm talking about. But It's a tough one because I do think that there is a bias and a narrative in the press as to how these things are covered that makes it look like Arsenal's always lowballing, and it's convinced a tremendous amount of fans, both within the Arsenal fan base and outside of it, that it's true. As you astutely mentioned, the first bid. I mean, if you make a first bid and it's accepted, the likelihood is you've bid too much. You know, when you buy something on auction, there's always going to be that question of, could I have gotten it for less, or could I not have? And we're talking about real money. We're talking about, like, you know, if you go and bid 110 and say take it or leave it, they're not going to say, okay, we'll take it. They're going to call Manchester City. They're going to call Chelsea. They're going to call Saudi Arabia. They're going to do everything that they can to place pressure to up the initial bid. So it's setting the beginning of kind of a haggling zone, and I don't think it's particularly derisory. I think it was pretty clear what needed to be done that was never going to be accepted. That 92 was this magical number that needed to be the starting point, and then you talk about structure of deal. So 80 plus 10, with the 10 being unrealistic and the 80 over 6 years, that's never going to get accepted. But that doesn't mean it's derisory or that it's, you know, it's what's the word? It's, you know, taking too long and it's bumbling and it dragging on. I mean, I think that there is a desire to get this done from Arsenal. I don't think there's it's not like ones of the past with the 40 million and one. The club has shown that they're willing to go up. They showed that with Caicedo. They showed that with Mudryk. You know, they didn't get either of those players for different reasons. But I think there's a willingness to get the job.
White. You know, we bid 40 million for Ben White, and Brighton said 50 million, so we bid 45 million, and they said 50 million, so we bought him for 50 million. You know,
yeah. there wasn't a tremendous amount of other teams in for him, though. I mean, it does seem that it does seem that the players we get across the line are players that are just linked with us and with nobody else. Thomas Partey, I know there was a release clause, but no one else was triggering that release clause. It was always going to be us or nobody. And with Declan Rice at this point, it's not so much us or nobody, but it's.
I think there is something to be said about the where you are as a club and the players you start to go for as you climb the table. You know, when we were trying to fight for top four and trying to qualify for the Champions League, the caliber of player we were looking at then compared to the caliber of player in terms of £100 million plus deal for Declan Rice, that, you know, there is differences. So the higher you go, the higher your ambitions are in the market, the more teams are interested. You know, Kai Havertz has had interest from Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. Neither of them have necessarily moved for the player yet, because I think they've recognised how far along Arsenal are and how much Arsenal are willing to pay to get it done. But with Declan Rice, you know, there's not been any other bids. I know there were suggestions that another club were going to come in and bid, you know, the day after ours. That's not materialised to my understanding.
And that's I firmly believe that's West Ham basically trying to
that's exactly what it is.
To publicize / leak / create interest from other sources as a way of changing the leverage on the deal, because otherwise, if no one else comes in and bids and Arsenal's bid is 80 plus 10, there, you know, West Ham's going to have to accept 80 plus 10 because Declan's leaving. So, you know, they have to do that. And you just wonder how much of it is legitimate and how much is manufactured. So, you know, it could end up looking like a brilliant piece of business from Arsenal if, in fact, Declan has his sights set on Arsenal. That's it. He doesn't want to leave London. Chelsea, you know, seems to be more focused on Caicedo, and I don't even understand remotely how they have money to spend on anybody at this point. But, I mean, legally, I mean, not that there's not money in the bank, but so, you know, I don't think it's derisory. I think as long as there's discussions that continue between the team, I think that deal will get done. And it'll probably get done somewhere around, you know, 90 plus 10, and maybe the 10 will be more realistic. Maybe the payments will be over 3 or 4 years rather than 6. Someone said West Ham wants them over 2 years because of FFP issues. Well, West Ham does have FFP issues, but getting that money over 2 years versus 6 has nothing to do with that. Right. It's completely and totally irrelevant to that. So, yeah, I mean,
I know you love your finances, and it is something I want to discuss. You know, like from some people's points of view, they feel as though this summer, you know, the Cronkies aren't investing enough, you know. So if Arteta wants Caicedo and Rice, as his two priorities, which we at no point this summer have we had any indication from any official sources that Caicedo is being approached, pushed for at any stage. There's certainly interest from Arsenal, but no one has confirmed, by the way, that we've made two offers so far for midfielders. One is for Declan Rice, and one is for Ilkay Gundogan. They're the offers we've made, and then you have Havertz.
We've made a concrete offer for Gundogan to his camp?
As far as I'm aware, there's been an offer made to him in terms of Arsenal be willing to sign him, whether that's a verbal or something official. But Arsenal have approached that situation, to my understanding anyway. So, as in they've kind of thrown their hat into the ring of clubs that would be willing to sign him on a free transfer. They're the two players we've approached as priorities: is Rice, Gundogan, and then of course more recently Havertz has been added on top of that. And it seems as though Lavia might be the next one we move for. But I have said, and I feel as though this summer Arsenal should be looking at potentially spending upwards of £250 million to do the last part of the major spending that we should do. And then in the subsequent summer windows, we'd be adding between 1 and 3 players to a point where we get to that self-sufficiency that we've talked about. We get to the point where last summer, Man City made a profit in terms of their net spend, if you like, But so, I get the sense that maybe there are still restrictions, but is it right that there are restrictions, or if you're aware of, or you can work it out from, because I know you look at the details of the finances, are there restrictions on what Arsenal can spend from what you've seen?
Well, no, not from a legal or an FFP standpoint or any of that. It's just it's back to kind of the Kroenkes deciding what they want to, how much they want to invest. Do they want to become self-sufficient now, or do they want to wait until they've got Champions League money for a few years? Do they want to ensure that they're competing for titles? And it kind of is a show of ambition this summer from the Kroenkes. The transfer, the way I generally look at, without getting into too much detail, the way I generally look at these transfer decisions isn't about how much you spend on transfer fees in any one window, the transfer kitty or the war chest. It's what you do to the rolling and ongoing total of wages and transfer fees. Because transfer fees, as most people now know, are spread over the entire course of the contract. So if you pay £100 million for a guy on a 6-year contract, you're giving
yourself some tough maths there. Well done.
No, you're spending £16.666 million.
There you go. Love it.
On maths. Don't start on me with maths.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about English or social studies.
I was wondering when you said 100 million across, I was like, oh, if he goes for 5 years, he's got himself a good. But when you said 6, I was like, oh,
no, 7 years would be 14.3 million. I mean, don't come at me, bro. But no, but so you're spending that much more money on an annual accounting basis. Whether the money goes out over 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, that's not what Arsenal look at. They look at the annual finances, and so 16 million go out, then plus the wages that they pay each year. So you could sign a 100 million pound player on 120,000 a week, and then you can sign a 40 million pound player, pay him 250 or 300,000 a week, like an Aubameyang type 4 years ago would have cost somebody, and spend the same amount of money on an accounting basis every single year. So I don't look at it that way. I look at what the total player spend is. And since 2018, the cleanup that we've done with getting rid of all those high contracts that weren't producing for us, keeping players on a pretty good wage structure, and now rewarding our future linchpins of our teams with fair and equitable pay and putting them at the top of the list, we've reduced our annual wage bill and amortization on new purchases from like 250 or 260 million down to under 200 million, and are now starting to build that back up. So, we had room to make all those signings of the last 2 summers and still have a lower total wage and player cost than we did 5 years ago when we had Mustafi and the dreck of players with awful contracts.
Lacazette.
Yeah. Now this summer represents a place where if we do make 3 or 4 top signings and with significant transfer fees and wages that range between 100 and 250,000. I mean, I don't know how much Cancelo would be, and that's a name we haven't even brought up, but he's used to making 250,000 a week. Yeah. If we start signing those kinds of players, our player costs will now rise to its highest level ever. But isn't that what we need to literally be competing.
But
and
our revenue will also be at its highest level ever.
Well, I mean, we're going to make a profit this year. And that won't send people jumping for joy, but it's been about 5 or 6 years since we've turned a profit because we haven't had big European money. Now we have that.
That won't take into account this summer, right? When the finances come out. So, or will it?
Well, I think we're going to just about break even for the year that's ending in 2 weeks.
Right.
Because we will, and that's with Europa League money. Next season, with Champions League money, I think we turn a profit, and that does include anything that we might do over the summer. Because again, you don't just spend 200,000 and that takes away, or 200 million and that takes away 200 million of profitability. It's much more nuanced than that. So, so to answer your question, we have the money, but it is something of a leap of faith for the Cronkies to spend it. But I think more so than ever, this is a leap of faith that you have to take. And
if they don't, are they worthy of criticism?
If they don't bring in 2 or 3 significant players that end up, I mean, that are expensive because they're good and they're the specific players we need, then I would leave them open for criticism. I wouldn't be calling for their heads, but I would certainly. This is not the time to start lowering our expenditures to get back to self-sufficiency. This is the time to put us over the edge that we have grown and spent the last 4 years growing to. And I think that the one similarity between their American sports successes, as JC ends up behind me, and I can see this getting clipped for Sky Sports, the finance expert.
Finances with Mike, and it's just a unicorn in the background.
The difference between the American sports that they have now won championships in every single one of and Arsenal is that there is not a guaranteed profitability built in to the wage structure there, where they could spend as much money as they're legally allowed to over there and still turn a 40 or 50% profit. It's how you spend the money. It's not whether you spend the money over there. Here, it's both. And by here, I mean over in London where you are. It's both. And so I think they need to spend it. They need to sacrifice a little bit of profitability to get us to where we are assured of competing with the Giants once again next season.
Our mutual friends, Tom Sabol, with the super
chat. Going to see him next week.
Are you? Nice, lovely stuff. Says Mount Feinberg behind Mike is what we consider a huge elevation here in Florida. It's very flat out there. Then I should.
Is that speaking of Mount Feinberg, and this is not going where you think it's going. No one's talking about Mason Mount anymore.
Well, it's because his preference is Manchester United, and Arsenal have kind of accepted, and that's why we're going for Havertz. By the way,
I thought his preference was to play with Declan Rice.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that that obviously we moved for Mason Mount at the beginning of the window, and that was kind of our priority, kind of forward, offensive-minded midfielder, if you like. After his preference has been, Manchester United, which is fine. Players have different preferences. That's fine. We have to deal with that. Declan Rice is Arsenal over Man City from the sounds of things. That tells you kind of about the difference in how different players feel. But I like the Havertz link. Mason Mount I like as a player as well. And I would have happily seen him at Arsenal too. I'm intrigued about how Havertz ends up working out. I know he's not a player we're really touching upon today because I'm looking more at kind of the deeper areas of the midfield, but it is going to be intriguing how that midfield fits together next season. We've got, how long we got left? 10 minutes. Why don't we dedicate the last 10 minutes to the chat box? So if you've got any questions, it's user question time. You can get them into the chat box now. Anesimos says, Tom, you should really be taking a summer vacation before pre-season starts and the transfers ramp up. I can't get to Florida, Mike. I'm sorry. Yeah, you enjoy yourself.
Pool's waiting for you. It's a lovely 88-degree pool and 94-degree weather. So, and I'm not translating that for you.
I am taking actually a couple of holidays, but I am still going to be hopefully producing some shows whilst on them. I'm going to Copenhagen next week for a couple of days. The other half is out there for a conference, so I'm flying out there for 3 extra days, and then we're going to meet up and enjoy that. So,
did you say for 3 extra days or for free extra days, like you're not paying for them?
Oh no, it's for 3 extra days of my
Oh,
expense. You know,
oh,
it's
okay.
what the members. Thank you, members. It's, my wages are paying for that. But no, I am taking a little break, but I am going to hope to still produce the 8 a.m. show because it would actually be 9 a.m. there, so it actually makes it easier to record an 8 a.m. show whilst there. And then the other trip is down to the south in the New Forest in Hampshire here in the UK for a week of glamping. Have you been glamping before, Mike?
Glamping is too much roughing it for me. I refuse to go camping. And even glamping is I mean, does your glamping have a pool? Does it have a unicorn? I mean, like, these are the things I need in my life, and I mean, I can't do like eating food out of a can.
Yeah, Jason, you were drunk, mate. I don't know what you're talking about. No idea what you're speaking about, mate.
By the way,
Let's
Jacob
go.
Fields in the chat, who's clearly listening to this about 40 minutes off of, like in catching up.
So
from
he'll
40
see
minutes
this in
ago.
40 minutes time. Yeah.
Yeah. You missed the part where I said I don't know anything about football, but yeah, the Nathan Ake did play for Chelsea, and that's when I identified him. When Bournemouth signed him, and he actually became good enough to get on Man City's radar, that was too late already. But yeah, Lewis Dunk, I'm getting it confused with somebody else who did play every minute of every game for Chelsea, but.
It's amazing. It's like people on here like jump on and go, doesn't know anything, like they've never made a mistake in their entire lives.
Well, and the thing that these people don't know about me is I don't claim to know anything.
Yeah. And he also doesn't care if he gets something wrong.
No, I don't, because my brand is that, every once in a while I pull something good out, and most of the rest of the time I'm just talking complete rubbish.
Yeah,
but I have fun doing it. That's
yeah, fun doing it. Talking to us from his other house in Florida, from inside a pool, where he'll then be coming over to the UK and talking to us from inside Highbury. So, do you tell me if you think he really cares about a little troll online? But
it's a great name, though. I like his first name. It's
indeed. Keesby says, even with the new signings, does our starting 11 change apart from Xhaka's replacement? So, say if Partey doesn't leave, for instance, we sign Rice, we sign Havertz, we sign Lavia, we sign a right back, let's say Fresneda, we sign potentially a left back if Tierney leaves. What changes, if anything? I think it's Rice would come in to the team.
Rice walks into the team. I mean, even if is the question, like, even if we didn't lose Xhaka and Partey, or Xhaka or like either one of them, I think the only person that our starting 11 was probably the second best starting 11 in the league. I mean, you would hope that would be the case with the team that finishes second. But for the first time in years, there's not a ton of players who should come in and automatically unseat. You could say that we could probably bring in a 9. There are 9s in the world that would make Gabriel Jesus a depth player or somebody that could go out to the wing. I mean, that position, ironically enough, since he was the savior last summer that came in and changed everything, he's the guy that you could probably most improve upon. Left back, well, no, not if Zinchenko is healthy. So it'd be hard. But that's what we need, though. We need to bring in guys to do that. So Rice strolls into the team. Depending on who we lose, they stroll into the team. But we need to be signing guys that give us the ability to not have such a drop when we need, depth from a replacement, from an injury, or from rotation. Is that okay, Jacob?
Yeah. He knows his stuff. Ray Beam says,
he'll answer in about 45 minutes as well when he gets to this part of the podcast.
Yeah, indeed. What do you think the plan is with Fabio Vieira? He gets a pass for his poor, mainly first season, but how much time before the loan/sale is warranted? Yet to be convinced, as you can tell.
I think this is the type of thing where he starts with the team. We hopefully
turn to your left quickly, very quick turn to your left. It doesn't work. I was hoping that the horn would kind of poke out directly. Yeah. There we go. Hold on, find it. There it is. You know those things you've been saying about Mike? He is that now.
I would say, I mean, I don't think he's getting sent on loan this summer, but if we are able to, this is going to sound pretty bad, but if we're able to keep him off the pitch until January, because health and quality of other players allows us to do that, then I think you could see him going on loan in January. And I think that would be good for him.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think that makes sense. That for the first half of the season, let's see what happens. Let's see what minutes he gets. If he's not getting any minutes, there's nothing wrong with allowing him to leave on loan if we feel that we've got enough depth.
And if he's not getting enough minutes because he just can't break into the squad because there are players in front of him who are playing better and not getting hurt, that's a good thing. That's a really good thing.
Yeah.
Sam Lukaku should have learned that. But yeah, that's a good thing.
Mr. Maths Academy says, what price do you think our starter 11 will go for? Right, we're going to do this quick fire. I'm going to give you each player. You don't get thinking time. You've got to say a number, million-wise. So
I love that name, Mr. Smith's Mask. How much would I be comfortable selling them for, or how much do you think? If the club said we're selling him, you don't get a choice in the matter.
Yeah, I know. But this is saying if you charge the club and you have to name the figure to sell the player.
So this is going to make me look like a real homer, I think. But
Ramsdale,
75 million.
Ben White.
I mean, someone called Pickford a 100 million pound player, and so if he's a 100 million pound player, then Ramsdale's 90 to 110. But I don't believe either one of us. All right, who are we going with?
Come on, Ben White.
I'm sorry. Who? Ben White?
Ben White.
60.
Well, you bought it for 50.
I know. Well,
sorry, no, I'm interjecting. To be fair, DJ Assassin also agree with you. 60 million.
Yeah, I mean, when DJ Assassin agrees with you, you're on the right track.
Saliba, we've just signed up to a brand new 5-year deal.
120 million. I couldn't hear you.
Gabriel, sorry.
Gabriel, 65.
I'd go T for me. Zinchenko.
72.
Oh, interesting. Same play then. Interesting number. Partey.
30.
Xhaka. Seems to be 30.
It seems to be 13. I'd like to say 20, but it seems that he's being given his ability to dictate where he goes. So yeah, 20.
Is my mic wrong? Is something going wrong?
Yeah, you suddenly sound like a cartoon character. It was hilarious. First I couldn't hear you, and I was worried that my internet was going out. Secondly, then you started sounding like a Disney character.
Still sounding like a Disney character.
No, now your voice is fine, but it's coming in and out.
Oh,
I thought I was the only person hearing that.
I've switched mics and there's still a problem. It can't be to do with the microphone then.
Now you're back. You're back to normal.
Okay, cool. Right, great. I'm gonna have to check how that sounded. That's interesting. So what did you say for Xhaka? Sorry.
I said 18.6.
Okay, specific. Odegaard.
Dumb cartoon. Odegaard, honestly, 110 million.
Yeah. Saka.
180.
And
if we were presented 180 as Arsenal fan, I would not want to sell him for that. Yeah, give us 250. Give us Neymar money, and maybe we'll talk about it.
Martinelli.
93.21 million paid over 4 years.
I was going to say 93.19, so we were pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, I outbid you by a little bit, but
yeah. And Jesus.
That's an interesting one because I don't know that he's done much to increase his value to where he'd be a 70 or 80 million pound
contract
player.
Length and
as good as
there aren't that many strikers out there at the moment.
Yeah, well, as good as he was when he was good this season, before his injury, we bought him for what, 45 or 50?
45.
I mean, I'd say probably 53, 54 at this point.
Yeah, I was saying 60 plus, I think. But that I think would get Arsenal over the line to maybe bidding for Osimhen and Kolo potentially, so maybe that it might be worth doing it, but I don't see that happening. I don't see anyone coming in for him. Maybe Saudi Arabia. We'll have to wait and see.
If it's Saudi Arabia, treble, sorry.
Yeah,
everything
every figure we've come up with, triple it for Saudi side comes in. We're going to end the show there. Thank you so much, everybody that's tuned in. Sorry for the slight mic issues, although it sounds like it was more of a treat than an issue for you. But thank you, everybody that's tuned in. Do indeed drop a like on the video and subscribe. As I say, there's been concurrently over 1,000 of you listening for a show that we planned about half an hour before we went live. It's great.
When we do that, we get somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 12 people. I mean, we get dozen and dozen of person.
Dozens and dozens.
No, just dozen, not dozens.
Where are we at in subscriber wise? You're just over 3K subs. Let's see if we can get it up to like 3.1. If you're not subscribed to the Gooners pods, let's see if we can do a challenge. How many subscribers can we get going over to the Gooners pod? So at the Gooners pods is where you need to go to get it. Mike is there.
Follow us on Twitter, because that's when you're going to find out when we pod. I say this every month and then I lie, but we're gonna start doing some of the old fashioned Gooners pod content again, guest interviews. I mean, the one thing that we're good at, is getting really, really good and interesting guests to talk to and interesting conversations. And we've kind of fallen off that in the last year or so for various personal and business reasons on my part. But we're looking to get back into that, because that's what I truly, truly love, much more than breaking down transfers. And I mean, with you always, but we're gonna put out some interesting content, and we'll be covering in a very major way the Arsenal summer tour in DC, New York, and LA. So, and I'm actually going straight from LA to London.
Oh, really?
And I'll be there
with any of you for this trip.
I'll be the DC part.
Is that it?
Yeah. I'll be there for the Emirates Cup, the Community Shield, and the season opener against Nottingham Forest. You better not come to the Nottingham Forest game, because anything Nottingham Forest and you turns out miserable.
Hey, I was at the 5-0 win earlier in the season.
Yeah, but you've also been to we've lost to them 9 times out of 10 that you've been in, so.
Yeah, I watched them lose in the FA Cup. I watched them lose 1-0. Obviously, when we both hold on, you went to that game as well.
I was kind of at that game. I wasn't truly.
You weren't very conscious.
I slept through that game just like Arsenal did.
If anyone, I don't know if Dan Potts posted that picture anywhere, but. Yeah.
No, the ginger fella posted that picture on his Instagram story, so people have seen it.
One of the fellas. Right. Thank you so much, everybody that's tuned in. We will see. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Of course, as always. Mike, of course, you can find him at the Gooners Pods. Make sure you're subbed if you're not already. And you'll see people like Owen, of course, who does our Eat, Sleep, Arsenal repeat shows. Jared is a good friend of the show, of course. Andy and Mike Hertz as well. And Aston is appearing too.
Aston's been carrying the podcast over the last 3 months.
I've seen. Yeah, he did a show with Andy. Actually, turned up for a show. I mean, that's fair. He's done 2 in 13 days, according to the show. So that's a record. It must be.
He's the most prolific podcaster I know.
Yeah, it's just so insulting. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. As I've said a few times already. But final things. Obviously, I've got news of a fundraiser that I want to talk to you about. Hopefully tomorrow, in aid of Cancer Macmillan support, which obviously is a charity we hold very dear to our hearts here at TGT. And I've got some stuff coming up to talk to you about that now that I've had some confirmation. I'm really hoping to bring you news of some more exciting projects that are coming up over the summer as well. But yes, to get up to date with all of the tour stuff, if you're based in the States, there's one man that you need to make sure you're linking up with, and that's Mike. And I remember at the Forest game where someone messaged me saying, do you know anyone like going to the game and the Forest game, and they're coming over from the States, and I sent them your way, and then lo and behold, they were there when I got there. So it clearly works. So yeah, fantastic.
That's right. And then there was another couple who recognized me, and then I'm like,
not me.
You know this guy? And they're like, no, we haven't met this guy. And I was like,
you literally loved that. You loved that situation so much.
Oh, that was the best. That was the best moment of my life, and the final moment that day that I actually recall. But I'm like, this guy is literally 475 times the footprint on the world that I have, and you just recognize me and have no idea who this guy is. So it was beautiful.
It was a great moment, and I had a good conversation as well. And good. It's always good speaking to fellow Arsenal fans, especially those from abroad.
It's always good speaking to the civilians.
The civilians. Goodness me, we're going to wrap this up before he starts to cross the line. We'll see you soon, guys. Have a great day, and as always, keep following us down the Arsenal ways. Mess my head up, but as always, up the Arsenal.